Hey, and welcome to video presentation number 11 for our English 2170 Introduction to Film class. This one is on method acting and Hollywood performance. Last video, I asked the question, why did personality stardom get replaced by actor stardom around the 1950s or so? Why did the audience and the actual performers themselves go from like playing the same character from film to film to film to becoming different characters from film to film? And why did the audience use that as the standard for good acting rather than the earlier version of personality stars? Well, the answer is method acting. A style of acting that came out of Russia in the late 19th and early 20th century, and which is defined as the following. If a performer truly feels the emotion that a character feels, that performer's body will automatically move to express that emotion. Okay, so you hear about actors being sort of divas on the set, whether it be in live theater or in film, where they'll go off and sit for a half hour and say, I've got to cry in this scene. So I've got to find the emotional core that will allow me to cry, et cetera, et cetera. That's what method acting is. It's turning yourself into the character by connecting with the emotions that the character feels, and then your body will automatically follow to express those emotions. There are certain strategies that method actors use in order to do this. Emotional recall, for example, which is exactly plumbing your own memories in order to feel that way. So if there is a scene where you're supposed to be sad, well, then you start thinking about a moment that's sad in your real life, so that when it's time for you to be sad, your body will automatically express that sadness. Ditto for happiness, ditto for joy, ditto for doubt. Whatever emotion your character needs to incarnate, you use your memories to recapture that emotion, and it adds to your performance and makes your performance convincing. There's also something called sense memory, where you can use different senses in order to ignite a memory. You may remember, for example, the smell of your grandmother's apple pie, and it's remembering that smell or even replicating that smell if you can, that will unleash, let's say, for example, the emotions that you need to unleash in a scene where you're playing against a fictional grandma on this movie set. So using your emotions, using what you remember about your past, using memories in order to replicate those emotions is what method acting is. It's not pretending to be someone, it's replicating the emotions so that's not a pretense anymore, so that you really feel those emotions and your performance carries along that convincing quality. The theorist who's usually associated to be the person who invented method acting, although like everything else that's invented, it's complicated, is a Russian actor, director, and author Konstantin Stanislavski. As a matter of fact, in live theater, it's often called the Stanislavski method, in tribute to this important theater pioneer. Stanislavski's theory started to migrate to the United States around 1930 or so, and hit live theater first. Lee Strasberg, for example, started the group theater in 1931 to sort of explore Konstantin Stanislavski's theories in English translation, although the translations were kind of rickety, and so there are some differences between Russian Stanislavski method and the method as it emerges here in America. But there are a number of pre-World War II theaters that start to take it up, particularly the group theater that combines this love of more authentic acting with a kind of leftist agenda in terms of the plays that they put on. This thread is picked up after World War II, particularly with the Actors Studio, a loose group of theater directors, actors, performers, producers that started to get together in the late 1940s and continued to plumb what could be found from Stanislavski's method. This was also parallel to a acting coach on the West Coast named Stella Adler, who was an important influence on a number of movie actors and what they learned. I think her last big student was what's his name? Who played the Hulk? Mark. I can't remember his name. But anyway, the person who's usually seen as the person who takes this American version of the method from live theater to cinema is Marlon Brando, and that's why Brando is considered to be such an important actor. He's the one who brings a greater authenticity to acting, and he's the one who early in his career plays all kinds of different roles. As soon as he felt like he was being pigeonholed, he'd play something else. After he wins the Oscar in 1954 for On the Waterfront, where he plays a kind of Weasley, mealy-mouthed, undereducated thug who works on the docks, who redeems himself over the course of the film, he immediately turns and does a film adaptation of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar to prove that he does not fit in any of these pigeonholes and that his method is flexible enough so he can perform all kinds of different all kinds of different roles, all kinds of different emotions, all kinds of different performances. One of the things that's often actively encouraged as part of method training is improvisation. If you have a director or a producer or a scriptwriter who's sympathetic to the idea of the method, then he or she will be sympathetic to getting input from actors who so deeply dive into their roles that maybe they have better ideas for the direction or the dialogue of the characters than the original writer does. This was particularly true in the 1960s with a director like John Cassavetes, who would simply put together an idea for a script and then work for 6 months with a small group of actors to help them flesh out their characters and to receive information from them and ideas from them. It's less popular nowadays because there has to be so much control, particularly in blockbusters where improvisation is difficult because people are wearing green screens and have to move around and interact with all kinds of fictional elements, and it becomes more of a technical challenge than it does a kind of digging deep into your personality challenge. But when Cassavetes was shooting small 16mm and 35mm films about interacting characters, he would get his buddies together and make a film and shoot a film. And people would improvise, people would come up with ideas on the set, and they would build this kind of performance out of the emotional contact that they felt with their character as they were practicing the method. That said, the forms of improvisation that are popular in American culture these days are less rooted in dramatic acting than they are in comedy. In the late 1950s, there was a kind of vogue in American comedy where the comedians wouldn't work from a script, but rather would work from suggestions in the audience and build a performance that way. The earliest of one of these improvisatory comedy troupes was Chicago's Compass, which started in 1955 and would do improvisation based on suggestions from the audience and something called a living newspaper, where they would look at the headlines for that day and make up a skit based on the headlines as the news was even itself still unfolding. A number of people trained at the Compass and at offshoots of the Compass that would encompass also Chicago's Second City, which is probably the most important theater troupe, comedy theater troupe in the latter half of the 20th century. The history of the Second City is really, really complicated and hard to get into here. It encompasses Saturday Night Live, it encompasses SCTV, it encompasses Schitt's Creek, it accompanies all kinds of different actors in the comedic genre across all kinds of different forms of acting, television, sitcom, variety show, etc. I'll just focus on one person who seems to be the point man for it, Del Close, who started with the Compass, who became a performer and coach at Second City in Chicago, and who trained basically all the actors that are associated with contemporary comedy in some ways. You can see Del Close on his deathbed here being visited by Bill Murray, one of his students. And you can also see Del Close, a younger Del Close, and a very young Amy Poehler, when Del Close was helping Amy Poehler become an improv comic and to start her own improv troupe with Matt Walsh and other performers called the Upright Citizens Brigade. So Del Close was there. And it's fair to say that a lot of his strategies, including various exercises that would increase the ability of comedic actors to improvise a character, like the Herald, really helped to sharpen and shape the latter half of comedy in the 20th century in America. Just to give you a sense of some of Del Close's students, you can take a look at that list and see if you recognize any names on there and understand how much they might have changed the history of comedic acting. And the reason why I bring this up is that, yes, improvisation is an extension of the method, but it also is a method that still is used today in some comedies, including Best in Show, which is one of the comedies that we'll discuss this week. So we'll talk about method acting, we'll talk about comedy, we'll talk about improvisation in class, and I'll see you then.